Welcome back to the Hodge-Cast podcast. Today, we're talking all things nutrition, sports science, exercise. Why is that? Because it's new year, new me. As we reach 2025, everyone's on the health kick. So I'm in good company for these sorts of subjects. I'm joined by nutrition and exercise scientist, Sam McKenzie. Sam, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
No problem, mate. So before we kind of go into these topics, I think it's only fair. Let's give a little bit of an overview of yourself, slight background story, and how you came to be into Science2Health, your business, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'll let you lead on that, mate.
Science2Health started 2016. Prior to that, kind of through school, nutrition wasn't on my radar. In fact, my nutrition habits and diet were terrible. It was through school. I love science and I love sport. And it was only then when I went to college, not knowing what I wanted to do, that I discovered sports science. It was still growing then and wasn't what it is now. And when you study in sports science, you get introduced to a lot of different topics. So you get introduced to the human body, lab work, nutrition, many other topics. And once I found out that nutrition and science blending together and working with general public and athletes, that's then what I wanted to do. And then I worked as a teacher for a few years at Runshaw College. Then I worked for a private medical company as part nutritionist, part physiologist doing health checks and testing. And then I thought, I want to do this on my own now. And then 2016, Science2Health started.
Oh, brilliant, mate. Yeah, no, summed up in a nutshell there. I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview before I next ask this question, because we usually ask this question first, which is the icebreaker question. But I just kind of wanted to lay the foundations for the listeners, who you are and your background. So having said all that, obviously we're going to go into your expertise shortly. But the icebreaker question we ask all our guests is, what does challenge mean to you, Sam?
Challenge means to me growth and development. In my eyes, it shouldn't be a case that it paralyses you by fear, because to me a challenge shouldn't be something you're scared of, not to the point of not taking action, but something that should make you take some action. I've found, especially in what I do, if I'm not being challenged, I don't feel like I'm being productive. And that's what gives me the thrive for life, knowing that I'm helping people and also helping myself in my own health and development. So that is a key word to me in why I do what I do, and also making sure that I feel like I'm giving something to the world.
No, summed up. I was interested how you was going to answer that, because obviously, given some of the guests we have, it's quite a diverse platform, this. So we get people who've come from sort of like, true crime background, ex-criminals. We've also had pro athletes. So I was interested to see how a nutritionist would actually answer that. But no, I really like that answer, Sam. So kind of segueing a little bit, you touched on with regards to you started doing, you enjoyed science at school. As I've got older, just sidetrack a minute, I've kind of wished I enjoyed science more, because I love science now, listening to all podcasts, particularly like with the likes of Brian Cox and people like that, physics. But in school, I just found it really mundane, really boring kind of thing. So what was it that kind of piqued your interest in is it just something that you took to, you loved during school?
I loved the kind of application of it and how it could, the impact that it could have on people's lives, whether that is improving somebody's performance. I work with athletes every day at all levels that are trying the best to even get 1%. They're putting all the effort in, they're sacrificing so much, and they come to you and say, this is what I'm doing, how can I improve? And you can look at it and you're transferring research to practice, and you can straight away pick out things that they're not currently doing that don't necessarily add on time to their life. It's just a different decision they have to make, and they can get a lot more bang for the buck. And equally, and one I personally relate to, is working with, busy mums and dads that are really time crunched, trying to be present for the family, the work, usually putting themselves on the back burner. And again, I can coach them and help them with the decisions. Again, not necessarily adding time in and making it harder, but just a change in decision, changing the routine, and it can be life-changing.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that, and obviously we'll touch on some of the people, clients that you work with. What did you initially start off with? Was it just your everyday folk, or did you kind of go into more aspiring athlete sort of thing? How did you start off?
I started off with both.
Mm-hmm.
As I was working for the medical company, I didn't have any financial backing for equipment or lab kit or anything like that. And I thought this is quite a bit of a leap, this. But if I don't do it now, when? If not now, when? I was living with my parents back then, so it was more of a safer decision to make. Still quite scary, but it was a good time to do it. And I'd already started taking some clients on whilst I was in my old job, and it got to a point that I could kind of financially manage the decision and then free up the time to take on more clients. And then I took the leap and went self-employed.
Yeah. No, that's great, mate. Obviously, there's quite a lot of things that Science2Health offers, because obviously this as well, obviously predominantly this is going to be talking all things nutrition, but I suppose everything ties into one another with what you offer, doesn't it, with the testing. Before we go into that though, give us kind of opportunity, flex a little bit here, like give us a few sort of names, people you've worked with of an athletic background.
In sport, Paul Smith, the comedian.
All right, okay.
Jack Catterall, who's notably had the two fights with Josh Taylor. The first one that, in my eyes and many of the public's, was a very unfair decision.
100%. I mean, before we think, I'm a massive fight fan, so okay. I completely agree. I think Jack's going to have an incredible year this year. Yeah. You know, he's someone I've been watching for a while. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. But sorry, interrupted you there, mate.
Yeah, MMA with UFC fighters, Cage Warriors fighters, football, rugby, triathlon. For 2 years, I was the Team GB lead for GB Wrestling. So we went to European competitions, Worlds, British, Commonwealth Games, and that was a phenomenal experience to support some of them athletes in getting on the podium and winning some medals. And yeah, like there isn't one sport I could work in. I like working with a wide variety.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So for someone like the listeners who might be aspiring, nutritionists and what have you, and they haven't worked with people at that level yet, how did they when did you find the doors? Because obviously when one door opens, you generally find more doors open because it's a form of networking, isn't it? So how did you find the first kind of door to, let's call them a celebrity, but let's call them an athlete, who you started working with someone with a bit of namesake?
At first, I was thinking, there'd be no chance here. But literally just reaching out to people on Instagram, you'd be amazed at kind of where nutrition is at the minute. A lot of people need it. And believe it or not, the infrastructure for nutrition, especially in elite sport, isn't as developed as you might think. In a lot of elite clubs, they may have a nutritionist, but they won't be full-time. A lot of athletes won't be getting the exact support that they need. And a lot of it can be quite generalized nutrition for a whole team, rather than them as an individual. So it then becomes an additional need for them that they want and require. So just a conversation like that for them to tell you what you do and what kind of bespoke, personalised level you work at develops that interest. And then from there, like you said, it opens doors because one athlete tells another, one business owner tells another, and then you work hard and do a good job with them, and then the clients start coming along. And
of course, it's strings to your bow, your brand and your institution grows. The reason I asked that is I get asked a lot with some of the guests I've had, how have you managed to source them on? The funny thing is, you obviously I'm not going to publicise all the knockbacks I get, but you've just got to have that perseverance. And if you've got a show that meets the criteria, like for instance, speaking to yourself, then they're happy to come on and do it. So it's the same aspect, I guess, with nutrition, as you touched on. They're maybe not as educated on it as somebody else is. You come along, give them that, like, I didn't realise that, yeah. So it kind of, it's just putting yourself out there, isn't it, and reaching out.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that prompted me to think about also the ones that I did get a reply to, but wasn't the outcome that I wanted. So I remember messaging Charlie Edwards, boxer, really well-known boxer, world champion, sponsored by Adidas. Back when I think I messaged him in 2017, and he just said he'd already got someone. Same with Mike Grundy. And then later on, Charlie Edwards moved to Gallagher's gym, Bolton Way, and then he'd heard that I was a local nutritionist in that area, and I met with him in Starbucks, and I said to him, do you remember when I messaged you in 2017? And he said, no. And it was still there on Instagram. And I showed him and he was like, wow, how crazy is that? And the same with Mike Grundy. I messaged him. Mike's like a really, really loyal guy. He said, look, I've already got a nutritionist. If the opportunity arises in the future, I'd love to have a chat with you. Then we ended up working together about 5-6 years later at British Wrestling, because Mike was then coaching the wrestlers. A lot of people don't know Mike was a wrestler first before he went into MMA fighting, because there is a lot of crossover. And then me and Mike ended up working together.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's amazing how things can work out, even when you don't get that initial response as well.
Yeah, I think you've got to have that thick layer of skin, haven't you? Where you are going, just because you've got a knockback on that instance, as you've just quite rightly pointed out, doesn't mean further down the line you're not going to be able to work with that individual. And obviously, as your stock grows as well, then you're going to attract bigger names to come along. So, I mean, it might seem like a bit of an obvious one, but I mean, I don't think it's obvious. What's kind of like the most notable differences between working with pro athletes and working with, as you said before, like the mums and dads, business owners, or is there a difference at all from your experience?
Principles and actual goals, maybe two different things, but how their goal would work in terms of how I'd support them specifically with the nutrition day to day would be different. But the principles, a lot of them are actually the same. A lot of people don't realise that. Both are very time crunched. Both need help managing the time and the food decisions and it hopefully not becoming a really time crunched problem, something that's going to take them a long time to do. And a lot of the support is similar. Helping them understand nutrition day to day, how it can help them with their performance, whether that is their job or whether that is sport. Usually, again, they're both the same thing for a lot of the elite athletes. And just kind of supporting them and giving them kind of you become a lot like a counsellor as well as a nutritionist, even though people think you're just helping them with food. A lot of the decisions they make on what goes on that plate is because of their emotions, what's going on in the mind. So there is a lot of crossover, but people do think it's completely different.
So I suppose, could you give us any sort of insights into a little bit of obviously I don't expect you to give everything away, but a little bit of insight into how you tailor a nutrition plan for more diverse clients that you may be working with?
So the first thing that I always do is meet them. I've got clients worldwide, but it'd be either a virtual meet or an in-person meet, preferably an in-person one, because I like that old-fashioned element. There's less of it today, isn't there?
There is, yeah. And it's I think you can't take away speaking to someone face-to-face, looking at them directly.
And a lot of people prefer that. And what I'll do is I'll do a needs analysis and check, what's their background, what's the relationship with food like, what are they actually trying to achieve? And that will actually then dictate what route I choose to go down with the method. Not everybody gets a nutrition plan, because for some it might actually be detrimental, and for others it'll be really good because it shows them what a good week might look like in terms of that's conducive to their goals, what they're trying to achieve. And others, a plan would cause more stress than necessary, and it helps to work on habit formation and really deep diving on the coaching with them, so they don't have to look at a plan, because a plan might kind of make their relationship with food worse. So you've got to find a starting point and meet the client where they're at and take them from there. That's why it doesn't look the same for everybody.
It's interesting that, because I suppose the next series of questions we're going to speak to you about are obviously the fitness testing. So a lot of this, I suspect what you do in terms of working out whether they need a plan, what they need, what tweaks and adjustments they need to be, is based on, because it's not one size fits all, is it, for individuals? And I know that might seem obvious when you're comparing, say, like a Jack Cattrall to, a working mum, but as you touched on, there are a lot of similarity traits, but working with you're going to be able to crunch the numbers and adjust accordingly. So give us a little bit of an overview of what Science2Health does from not just a nutritional standpoint, but obviously all the testing stuff that you do and how that helps and accommodates.
I could waffle on this answer all day, but it's
waffle
probably...
away, mate, waffle away.
It's probably best I get straight to the point. So there's basically three things that I do at Science2Health: nutrition coaching, health checks, and fitness testing. And then people either go the combination of all three, or it will be just one of them. But the kind of one-to-one coaching that I offer has a combination of all three in there. Fitness testing, if it's relevant for the goal. But as you alluded to before, a lot of what we do is personalised, which means we get to understand a person much deeper than just a generic plan would achieve, or a calculator. We get to understand them, their psychology, which is usually the backbone behind why they make the food choices and decisions that they make. But also we get to understand their body on a physiological level under the hood, so to speak, blood work, metabolism testing, fitness testing, things that they wouldn't otherwise know. There's a lot of great resources out there if people just go and read about the fitness, and they can go and train to the principles that we know get people fitter. But unless you test yourself, you don't know where your specific strengths are, where your specific areas for improvement are. So to get the best bang for your buck, a phrase I say way too much, is test, don't guess. Because you just then get that kind of bespoke footprint and understanding of your body. So then we can then translate that into a game plan that gets you to your optimal, whether you're a busy mum and dad or whether you're an athlete.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting that. And the whole time you was talking, it kind of like at the start of this conversation, you touched on your love for science kind of thing when you was younger. And it is based on facts, isn't it? Based facts, figures, to then improve performance. So I just want to kind of put a bit of context on it for the listeners. So I'll use myself as an example here. So say I come and spoke to you, Sam. Let's just look, I don't know, some random goals. I've got High Rocks coming up. So obviously I want to try and get fit for that. Yeah. But I also want to make sure that everything else is intact with what I'm eating, what I'm consuming. Obviously, my sleep prioritised and all that good stuff. What could you kind of give us as a very brief overview, just off an example of myself? If I was to come to you, I know you'd have to do the finer things with the testing, but what would you do in that aspect?
Yeah, that is what this conversation is all about. When I sit down with somebody for an initial consultation, I've got the wide range of services available. Then once you tell me what you're doing and where we're going and what you're hoping to achieve, it then narrows it down to exactly what you need. So I would say is there a body composition goal, first of all? And where are you wanting to be with that?
So for obviously with High Rocks, at the moment, I'm 97 kilograms. Yeah. Ideally, I want to be lighter, not lose too much strength, because obviously there's a functional element, but certainly be faster, because it's 60% running. So I want to kind of get the weight down in terms of body composition. I'm not going to be too strict on it, because as I touched on, I kind of would want to still maintain the strength, which is going to come with size. But generally, that's the only thing I'd kind of be. I want to be a little bit lighter.
And are we early on in High Rocks in terms of your participation in it, or is there a time in mind? Are we at that stage?
So let's go with 3 months. Because this podcast will be out, so it'll coincide. We're only going to be a couple of days out. Yeah. So doing Malaga solo efforts in March. My only experience would be of a very, very novice level. And I've only ever done doubles before. Okay. Being coached with Mark Dean at the moment, who I know is a client of yours. Yeah. So he's obviously got me on, well, we're just doing testing ourselves at the moment, but he's going to be putting me on me workouts and my routine and my structure in that sense. Okay.
So that's narrowed it down perfectly for me. So metabolism test, so I can find out your calorie requirements, so we can then put a nutrition strategy together that's bespoke to those needs. Growth and improvements in fitness don't just come from the training, they also come from what you're putting on the plate. You can end up with completely different adaptations at the start line if you've got 2 twins that have done the exact same training plan, but they've done the nutrition completely differently. You can still end up at the start line in completely different fitness because of the 3 T's, time in total and type of your carbohydrate intake and nutrition. Then I would do a body composition scan, see where you're at and see where the potential improvements could be. Fitness test, so we can see where your VO2 max is, where your threshold is, what your running economy's like, what your fuel utilization's like. And then I would, because I work with him and I know what kind of service he gives, I would then summarize all that, give it to Mark Dean, so then he can help you with that. And then we'd go through the specifics on a day-to-day level of delivery, so that we can get you in the best shape and condition for Malaga.
Awesome. We'll have to have a chat off camera, mate. So I was giving that as an example, but it became a sales pitch in the end. So no, hopefully, you know, I've kind of added a bit of context there for the listeners using myself. Segueing into this next question. So I know you mentioned that there's, you know, it's not one size fits all for everyone, but are there some fundamental nutrition points that everyone should be adhering to, no matter what your background is, what your end goals are, that sort of thing, the key fundamentals?
Yeah, this one's very difficult to answer. It's a great question because I know a lot of people want these answers. And in terms of answering the question, that there are general principles, absolutely. You know, there's things that I see on a day-to-day basis, whether it's an athlete or whether it's you know, a business owner or somebody working, you know, full time with, you know, parenting responsibilities. Often we're seeing that people aren't eating enough protein. People eating way too much processed food than they should. I'm not fully against, you know, taking processed foods out, because there are some contexts where sometimes for both convenience and health that some processed inclusion is actually not a bad choice. But also things like fibre, you know, and getting your vegetables and fruit. And as obvious as that might sound, so many times when I'm looking in people's blood work, when I'm having conversations with people, when I'm reviewing their nutrition, they're deficient in a lot of these nutrients in their blood that come from a lot of these foods. So they're a regular thing that I see on a day-to-day basis, that whether you're an athlete or not, that kind of the inclusion of these things can help health massively.
Yeah. And I suppose, I mean, some of the cliches, and obviously we'll touch on kind of like the myths later on. But what's kind of like the importance of? I mean, I've got jotted down here sort of the importance of balance of portion control and food diversity. How would you kind of? I know it seems obvious that they are important, but what's your kind of take on those, food balance and diversity?
I'm glad you used that word, obvious. What is obvious to people, and then what I see as a coach on a day-to-day. People generally have an idea of what they need to do, but if it was as simple as eat less and move more, we wouldn't have an obesity problem. You know, we wouldn't have people struggling with the nutrition. I wouldn't be inundated with, you know, inquiries from stressed business owners that just can't quite get it right. It's complex. There's a lot of complexities to it. People try and simplify it, and you get some people saying, let's just take it back to basics, eat less, move more. That just further frustrates people. So in terms of understanding this on a level of where I help people, it sometimes is saying the simple stuff, but it's putting it in a way that they can actually apply it practically. Because so often I'm seeing people not quite getting the portion control right. You know, like say on one of my coaching programs, on one of the videos, I show a portion of fish and chips. So it's very relatable. And I used to say, right, this meal here is from the chippy, so to speak, be about 1,200 calories. But if we made, you know, one small change to this, and we just took a quarter of that plate out, removed the chips, and put some of their, you know, favourite salad veggies in there, we're not taking away from the plate. We're adding a lot of volume in, but you've just reduced the calories by a third.
Yeah.
You've also changed the gut microbiome, because of the diversity that you will achieve from making that change. That's one small change. And when a lot of people are inquiring, they think that they're going to have to completely overhaul their whole life. That's what a lot of people have, that expectation when they're coming into it. And usually you kind of run before they can walk. But even small changes like that, and just teaching them what the plate should look like on a day-to-day basis and how it can make such a huge difference. And it's not necessarily about eating dust and going next to nothing. It's not always about taking away. It's sometimes about adding in and making changes. And the differences can be huge.
As you were talking though, it's good putting it in layman's terms, because as you touched on at the start of that then, is there is a lot of, and I think it's a lot because the industry is quite diluted in a sense. Anyone can go pick up a level 2 qualification and then spout that they're a personal trainer, nutritionist, that sort of thing. But there's a lot more layers to it. And, you know, that's the first someone's used the analogy with fish and chips. So it is very relatable. Do you think that presents a problem for someone in your line of work, that there are so many people who claim to be experts without doing the due diligence sort of thing?
The reason I called my business Science2Health was on an ethical basis of transferring evidence-based science to people's health. And when I first started, one of my main goals was to quash myths and give people clarity so that they could achieve goals without harm to their health and be optimal. Since then, it's got worse. So this is one of the reasons why I love coming on podcasts, because they're a fantastic way now that people get information and education. The convenience that they will get information while they're doing a car journey. But also one of the upsides is the opportunity there to educate people. One of the potential downsides is there's a lot of misinformation and sometimes dangerous advice that's put on these things. And unfortunately, that there isn't really anybody vetting qualifications and people's right or justification to be able to give the general public advice. And it's a big problem, a really big problem, and one that's worse than when I started.
Yeah, no, and I think it's the trajectory. It's only going to get worse. I mean, as you were talking then, and I've just thought of this now, so apologies, I can't remember the name. Stephen Bartlett had a guest on, didn't he, recently, talking about certain health aspects, and there was uproar because it turned out when people like yourself have gone back and debunked it, a lot of it wasn't accurate. But obviously he's got a massive platform, arguably one of the biggest in the UK, and people will hold on to that word. And again, I think it's down to the trajectory of it's getting more and more people now are getting what they perceive as hard qualifications, and not a lot of it's factual. So no, I completely agree with what you saying.
And you might see these people with millions of followers. Followers don't guarantee ethics. No. And also flip side, ethics don't guarantee followers. I know a lot of fantastic even professors in nutrition science, and they've got 600 followers. But I think in today's world, you are kind of judged on how many followers you've got, which to me is crazy. But yeah, Stephen Bartlett's podcast, I think there is some very good information on there. I actually love Stephen Bartlett as a coach, a business coach. But in my opinion, I'm not afraid to say that I don't agree with a lot of what's said on that show. Some of it is putting people in a worse position. Yeah, and some of it is completely not in line with what the scientific consensus is in the research. And yeah, like I sometimes listen to some of these podcasts and sometimes I've got my head in my hands. But again, they're on a big stage and it's going to be information that people follow and believe in. Another thing that happens regularly is men feeling depressed, feeling low on energy, feeling like they've just not got the thrive for life that they used to. Automatically thinking, because they've listened to some podcast, that the testosterone's low, not even testing it to see where it's at and whether it even is that, and then going straight to somebody that provides TRT and jumping straight on it. And then because of a lot of the adverts on Instagram only promoting the benefits of TRT and not the potential risks, we now have a lot of people using TRT, which if it's clinically justified, it's life-changing. But if people don't need to be on it, and that wasn't even the issue in the first place, there's a lot of risks associated with that people don't discuss. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, obviously, yeah, when you get big names, you go on podcasts, and I'm talking in all aspects, not necessarily nutrition, sports science, that kind of thing. I have more, and now I've kind of I do my own, and obviously nowhere near the level of like Diary CEO, but certainly when I'm listening to some, I can appreciate someone better if they openly say, this is just based on my own personal evidence, rather than trying to present it as fact. Yep. So they hold my attention more. And generally, when you've got someone who's, like you touched on, a professor, a scientist who doesn't say that, and they sort of have you believe what's coming out of my mouth is, you shouldn't listen to anybody else, this is 100% accurate. They're the ones that I find can be very dangerous, especially when they're on the bigger platforms.
Yeah, I think there's a sweet spot between the two. In that, I think one of the issues is that scientific research journals, who really wants to read them? It's not really bedtime reading, is it? No. I personally have a love for it, but I know that's not the common consensus, and also I need it for my job. But if we can make that more accessible, and that's to me where the key is. People are becoming more savvy to science now. The conversations that I have on a day-to-day basis with business owners, high-performing individuals that want to be at their best, that they are, are very open-minded to science, but it's just where they're getting it from, and how ethical that is. And from a you know, I had someone ask me a question the other day on Instagram questions saying, well, Stephen Bartlett's doing it to make money, and so are you, Sam. What's the difference? I was like, good question. Like, we're both business owners, and the purpose of a business is to make profit. Of course it is. I've no issue with that. I've no issue with people making money. It's the currency we need for, you know, the world to go around and to provide. But is what you're doing ethical? Is it helping people actually be in a better situation? And, you know, that is not risking putting their life in a more dangerous place or leaving them worse off. And that's where the difference is.
So going back on to, you mentioned, you listen to a lot of podcasts, you enjoy doing podcasts. You've also done quite a lot of TV media appearances, Sam. So obviously you won't be getting those kind of gigs if what you were saying wasn't accurate and there was substance to it, taking away the portfolio of people you're working with. Give us a little bit of background on those, mate, and an opportunity to kind of flex your brand, as it were.
It's something I usually shy away from, if I'm honest, because I know I should do, especially I feel like I can help a lot of people with quashing myths and getting people, you know, healthier, avoiding, you know, dangerous programs and things like that, and less ideal routes that they could go down. But yeah, it doesn't come naturally to me. The Sky Sports one, it was when I was at British Wrestling. I was working with a local lad, actually, Charlie Bowling. He was one of my wrestlers, and he had Sky Sports coming down to film a promo for him and another wrestler, Ross Connolly, for Scotland, to promote the Commonwealth Games. And I'd developed a really good relationship with them too, and they were really grateful. And they just said, look, we want you to get interviewed by Sky Sports here. I know we've not really give you the notice, but can you rock and roll with them in 5 minutes? And obviously, as it doesn't come naturally to me, that combined with being told I'm on Sky Sports in 5 minutes, I thought, I just need to do it. I just need to do it. So they asked me to get my testing equipment out, talk about how it works with the athletes and how it helps them. And that moment there gave me a real kind of thing about, if you can do that with 5 minutes notice, and a lot of people that it went out on Instagram to found it fascinating, and it went on to help a lot of people. So I thought, if I can do that with 5 minutes notice, come on. Coming back to that question about challenge, you know, we can get some developments here and help a lot of people along the way. So I had that mindset, and then I started working with Paul Smith, the comedian. He found out about us because I was working with some of the fighters at Tom Blackledge's gym in Wigan. And Paul just reached out and said, can we have a chat? And I was already a fan of Paul at this stage. And I was thinking, I remember running into the kitchen and saying to my wife, Paul Smith just inquired. Can't believe it. And then he said, look, Channel 4 are wanting to do this documentary for him about his preparations for the fight. He was doing a charity fight with Jake Quickenden, who won X Factor a few years ago. And I said, right, okay, no problem. He said, I'm going to bring the crew and we're going to do some testing. Absolutely loved it. And again, that was more eyes on what we do. Also, obviously for the right reasons for Paul and what he was doing for the charity. Like it just I started to become a bit better at it. And then, you know, like when you give me this great opportunity to come on here, it's something I can't turn down now.
I mean, we're not going to have the same reach as like Sky Sports or Channel 4, but I suppose this is more long form. And obviously the whole time you've been talking, I imagine it was the same ethos when you was on TV. People, when they see stuff and you're talking about something that you're passionate about, something that you're knowledgeable about, it will come natural to you, regardless of whether there's a camera, a film crew, all that carry on. And people will see that. Genuine people will definitely see that comes off. So, because you see some people, they go on TV, particularly like reality TV stars, if you can call them stars. They'll go on TV thinking, oh, their personality is going to reign for it, and then you never hear of them again. You know, that's the kind of one and done. Whereas when someone's coming on talking about a specific subject that they're good at, then that's going to resonate with a lot of listeners. And obviously with stuff like nutrition, it's very much at the forefront of people's, particularly, you know, most of the people I socialise with. They go to the gym, they go for a run, they train, they've got, you know, high rocks is coming up, they've got boxing matches coming up. So nutrition is a very much a focal point. And I think it's good, you know, going on different platforms, regardless of how big or small it is, because when you're passionate about something, that is going to radiate more for people to take on board. And then it's also going to elevate your brand as well, so you get the synergy off it. So
it's the only thing I love and I'm passionate about in terms of a role, of a profession. I love helping people. That's just inbuilt in me as a coach. And I'm glad there is something, because I don't think I could do anything else.
Well, no, it's, you know, and people, you know, particularly like with the athletes you mentioned, but also, you know, the everyday mums, business owners, they'll appreciate it as well, because you it's amazing really how something, because we can get wrapped up in our lives, like obviously yours in nutrition. Yes, you love helping people, but you can probably sort of not take inventory every so often of how many people you've helped, whether that's just a case you've helped someone drop a dress size, or whether you've helped someone like a Jack Cattrall beat Josh. You know, it's those kind of things that you get that satisfaction for, don't you? Because obviously it is your livelihood, and you're basically, yes, it's great to say I've done X, Y, Z, but it's also good for a personal point of view, and it probably stimulates you more to carry on doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and also one thing I've learned, especially from the early days of being a coach, is to ask the client, are they happy with their achievements, not going off what my expectations are. There's so many times I've seen coaches say, "Oh, right, so you've only lost £1 pound this week. We need to be up in the game a minute." And I'd be thinking, hang on a minute, why don't you just ask Sue whether she's happy with the progress? And because you don't know where, you know, what her background come from, what challenges she's had to overcome to get that result, and you know, that's still £52 in a year. It's still a serious achievement if it's consistent. So you know, you've got to ask the client whether they're happy, and you know, from their perspective. And you know, sometimes I'll hear wins that I never even thought of. You know, people just saying that the relationships at home are improving because of how they feel about themselves, their energy, thrive for life. You know, kind of just day-to-day relationships, even with their own children, just because they've got that freedom and more open space because of how they're looking after themselves. So, you know, there can be many wins even when you know, just trying to work on a weight loss goal, for example.
Yeah, no, massively. So I suppose we can divulge into kind of a little bit of expertise. So obviously one of the big ones, as this is going to be a more nutrition-based podcast, you see it everywhere now. I go do my big shop, admittedly, in Aldi, although Aldi's a good supermarket now, isn't it? It used to be sort of stigmatised around it. He was a bit of a, you weren't on a certain level of income if you were shopping at Aldi, but now I think everyone goes there. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is you go down the aisles and there's protein pizzas, protein, you know, protein seems to be everywhere. So I want to ask the question, how much protein does the average person generally need? I know that might vary, but from your take, your skill set.
Yeah, so this is, first of all, something that I see regularly, especially in the general public, that is underconsumed, and also it's a big buzzword. It's a big marketing thing now as well. And you know, the food industry will give the consumers what they want. Hence all these protein labels on foods. Now, there's two distinctions. The World Health Organization does give a guideline, but there's a few reasons why they give that guideline. That guideline is 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight protein recommendation. But there's a few reasons why they do that. One, to offset states of deficiency. So that's kind of minimum operating procedure, so to speak, to offset problems with health from absence of protein. But it also, remember, it's a World Health Organization. It's also considering poverty and poverty across the world. It's also considering socioeconomic status, a lot of complexities. So whilst they are, I would say, guidelines, there's big distinction between that and what's optimal. So in terms of optimal, and we're looking at different populations now, I would put, say, for instance, a 80 kilo female that wants to lose 10 kilos, that's got a 9-to-5 job doing, 5 to 10,000 steps a day, that wants to lose weight, they would be on double that. Whereas though if we then take, say, an elite cyclist, they may be on double that again. More towards 2.5 to 3 grams per kilo. So when you appreciate the roles that protein plays, and it isn't just in muscle, by the way, it's got a lot of roles. It makes you appreciate, okay, well, that 0.8 grams per kilo is kind of an absolute minimum. But that and optimal are two very different things.
Well, my next question was going to ask you, which you pretty much answered there, excuse me, is the kind of like the differences, protein requirements for athletes versus non-athletes, but you've kind of touched on that there.
Yeah.
So in terms of like nutrition for performance, so the question here we've got is how nutrition directly impacts physical and mental performance. I suppose you've touched on that in little elements, but we can expand on it. I suppose food dictates mood, doesn't it, kind of thing, to put it in a bit of layman's terms. But what's kind of your experience, the sort of science behind that, how that works?
It's like that old saying my mum used to say to me when I was younger, since you are what you eat. Whilst, there is some kind of downsides to that saying, but there is some truth in it as well, just in the sense that, the protein that you eat will become, a large part of it will become your muscular tissue. If you look at your arm now, I heard this from a guy called Luc van Loon, he's a professor from the Netherlands in muscle physiology. He once said, if you look at your arm now, in 3 months' time from right now, you're looking at that arm, it will be a whole new arm again in 3 months' time. Because the muscle has basically died and regenerated. So muscle is being built and broken down every minute. And the trade-off between the two, just like you would with accounting, the trade-off between income and outgoings is your net result of how much muscle you've got, whether you gain, maintain, or lose. And that is predicated a lot by your activity and your nutrition. Which is, that is an element of where, you are what you eat, so to speak. And then with the mood, over the last 20 years or so, and more so as time's going on, we're realising the influence on gut health. Not even that long ago, really, 20 years ago, we didn't even appreciate the value that the gut could have on our health. And whilst a lot of people may realise when they've done sporting events before, or whether they've had a really important meeting, that emotions can affect gut function, i.e. we get butterflies, or it even sends us to the toilet when we've got nerves. But it also works the other way as well, in terms of, and this is what a lot of people don't realise, and the science is emerging, is that what we eat then affects our microbiome, our gut health, which then affects the brain function. So we call that the gut-brain axis. The brain can influence the gut, and the gut can influence the brain. So that's where we're learning more and more now about just the power of nutrition. And also over the last 20 years, how it's become more and more prevalent, and people, getting nutrition coaches. They never used to be a thing, especially all this online presence. Now the demand for it's huge, because people are realizing the impact that nutrition is having on their health, and also the potential that it can have on not just the physical health, but the mental health as well.
When you was talking there, I was kind of trying to relate it to myself. And most recently, I was away for Christmas, and wasn't really calorie counting, wasn't really watching what I eat, was kind of eating whatever. And I did generally find, not so much me move, because it was only a week, so it was a short window. But I generally go to bed pretty early, try and get as much sleep as I can. Bit of an early bird, so I'll get up, 5 in the morning. Not because I'm sort of disciplined, I'm just regimented to do that now. It's become habitual. But while I was away, I wasn't staying out ridiculously late. I only drank a handful of times, alcohol that is. But I found that my sleeping was not the full 8 hours what I normally get. I mean, sometimes I'm quite a good sleeper. I can sleep 9 to 10 hours, if I've had a full training week. But I found that my sleep, and as a result of my poor sleeping, that of course made me a little bit more sluggish. My mood was fine because I was away, I had the sun, I was with family, so there was no real reason for it to be dictated in a negative light. But I did find just in that short week, I was chomping at the bit to not get back to the cold weather here in England, but certainly to get back to that routine of eating properly again. So no, completely can relate to that massively. And that was just in a short window. So imagine if you're eating rubbish all the time, that's only going to escalate that.
Yeah, and that what you said there about kind of the impacts on, I think that I always have the 80-20 rule, so to speak, as I promote it with clients, that, we don't call foods good or bad. I try and teach my daughter this, because she's constantly at this stage now asking me, Daddy, is this food healthy? Is this food healthy? And I don't like calling foods good or bad. You are the average of your behaviours in terms of your health. So that means, 80% of what you eat should be, minimally processed, whole foods that are very nutritious, and then 20% a bit of what you enjoy. Because, as James Smith says, that, and it is blunt, but, you know, he says that, you know, it is important to still be conscious of your health and your well-being, but remember that either way you're going to die anyway. So, but I think there's also a context of making sure that you know, you are in a good state of health, both physically and mentally along the way, because that is massively related to your fulfillment and enjoyment of your life.
No, yeah, I'm a big fan of James Smith. Yeah, I'd forgot he'd said that quote, so I was trying to work out where you going to go with this one, and then once you said it, I realised. Okay, so can you give us like a few examples? So I'll kind of put a bit of context on this next question. So a lot of people will want, because now they are a bit more forefront, they'll want a nutritionist, particularly athletes or aspiring athletes will want to work more on the nutrition. So what could you give in terms of examples of how proper diet planning can enhance performance?
Yeah, this one is kind of, again, sometimes underwhelming.
Okay.
Sit down with a client, you show them the nutrition strategy, and they can go, oh, that's not what I thought it would be. And this is where they have probably it's even sometimes a subconscious view or a bias of what they expect performance nutrition to look like. And they might say to you, well, I do very similar to this already. And then I would say in the kindest way, are you sure? Because this is measured off your own metabolism, your own blood work. And this, if we stick to this strategy, in 6 months' time, you're going to be 3 stone down. So this would probably suggest that that's not what you've been doing. And people are just completely unaware of what they're consuming. Completely unaware. In fact, there's studies that show when even medical professionals and nutrition professionals try to recall what they ate, and the studies have asked them to write it down on a diary, but the intake has actually also been measured. There's something that you can have called an isotope tracer, and you drink it, and it actually, once you've peed it out, you can measure how many calories that person actually consumed.
Wow.
They compared that.
And what's that called again?
An isotope tracer, isotopic tracer. They're very expensive to do in research, but when they're in a research project, it comes up much higher up the rank, so to speak, in terms of your attention to it. They're comparing that with medical professionals writing down food diaries of what they ate. Even the nutrition professionals were 20% out from what they actually consumed. So when I'm putting these plans out to people, and I go, just trust it. 6 months' time, they're 3 stone down. That isn't what they were doing before. People, generally speaking, including even so-called experts like myself, the human brain is not really good at recalling what we have and what we think we have and what we actually have. They're 2 very different things. So when we can actually put a strategy across that is more kind of promoting objectivity, we're trying to measure things, we're trying to make sure protein, carbohydrate, fat, and are all in a certain range. It's amazing what can happen when we actually get that. Not think we're doing it, actually doing it.
Yeah,
they're 2 different things.
No, 100%. I try to log everything now, but even that I'm not 100% accurate on. Not through trying to cheat myself. I just forget. Sometimes I'll have something passing, and if you're going into a meeting and they've got a spread on, I'm not documenting that. I've had a couple of sandwiches, sort of thing. Yeah. So yeah, I can see how you would face that quite regularly with the clientele you're working with. I want to touch on sort of vitamins, supplements, because they seem to be very much at the forefront. Some people argue everything should be natural, shouldn't be having supplements in any way, or you should get the vitamin aspect from natural sources. Some people are very pro supplements, vitamins, that kind of thing. Where's your stance on it before I start picking your brain about them?
Very good question. So supplements are exactly that. They are to supplement the diet. They're not an instead of. The clue and clarity is in the word. People just don't realise it. They should never really be the first approach when looking at making a nutrition intervention. But there are contexts where supplements are important. So, for example, beetroot. So we see that the research in beetroot is clear. It can help exercise performance by reducing the oxygen cost of exercise. It can improve blood pressure, so cardiovascular risk. But the amount of beetroot in its most natural sense that you'd have to eat to get the amount of nitric oxide that we know has a positive effect on health would be insane.
Yeah.
It'd probably make you ill
Yeah.
by the amount you'd have to eat. So that's why we have these concentrated shots. So there are contexts where supplements are relevant if that's the goal that you're aiming for. Vitamin D. In this country, you may see the sun out, but that doesn't mean that you're in the angle for the sun to actually absorb vitamin D from it. I won't go into the complexities, but you've got to be in something called the sun zenith angle, which is basically where the sun is directly shining on you. Just because you can see it doesn't mean that it's shining on you. And you need about 15 minutes of thorough sunlight exposure a day to get enough vitamin D. Now, I'm doing people's blood work day in, day out. There's a lot of people at this time of year with vitamin D deficiency. And to get enough of that from food, Professor Graham Close, a guy from Liverpool, John Moores University, is a nutrition scientist. He actually did the calculations on this and put it on an Instagram post. To get 1 day's worth of food that would then give you enough vitamin D for 1 day. So this is just 1 day. It was something, don't quote me on it, it was something along the lines of 143 eggs and 6,000 litres of milk to get enough for 1 day's vitamin D. So you're not going to get the sunlight in the UK, especially in the winter months. You've got to supplement. But then there's also cases where, we should be, for a lot of foods, like say, getting your omega-3, if you can eat oily fish, go for oily fish first. Food first approach because of all the other nutrients that you'll get with it as well. So, there are those contexts, but yeah, I'm in somewhere in between. I don't think it's a great place to be in a one or the other camp because there's complexities to this where there's context for both. But I always operate a food first approach.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I the only supplements I really take, and you can correct me if I'm doing it wrong, is I take a whey protein drink. Again, that's just to kind of crank the numbers up on the protein. A lot of the stuff I have is from natural sources. And then I'll take a handful of vitamins in the morning, which usually consist of zinc, magnesium, collagen, vitamin D, multivitamins, and there is another one. The name escapes me. It'll probably come back to me in a moment. What would you recommend sort of like in terms of what are the key vitamins? Because you see a lot of these, you see, again, going back to the people with loads of followers, they generally preach, oh, you should be having this, you should be having this, you should be having that. What's kind of like your take? And whether that comes from a supplement or a natural source, what's kind of like if you could condense it to say 5, maybe there's more, maybe there's not 5, what would you say are the key vitamins we should all be focusing on as a fundamental?
Well, a multivitamin to start with, I would only usually use that with clients if they're in any form of deficit where there's weight loss as a goal. If there's less nutrients coming in, there's more risk of deficiency. So it's a solid insurance policy. You may also get some, health and performance benefits by, supraphysiological levels of these vitamins and minerals. Got to be careful with some though, because they can be toxic. If you take too much vitamin D, for example, we're not in a good place. But then other things like fish oil, if you're not going to be eating oily fish 3 times a week, which is common. A lot of people don't do that and will tell you that they're not going to do it. They don't see it as feasibly something that they could do every week. So then I would have them taking an omega-3 supplement. Creatine. Now there's benefit. Creatine's probably one of the most researched supplements out there, especially for performance, in it regenerating your energy systems for repetitive reps in exercise. But also there's now research coming out to show that there's brain benefits as well on reducing the risk of Alzheimer's, and also some research to quite strongly suggest that it can have impacts on brain performance as well. So I would say that that's pretty much a staple as well. And then really there's not, other than vitamin D and the things that we explained before, it's a lot smaller of a supplement stack than people think. There is plenty of context where we can be looking at other things that could be a benefit, but they would be dealt with on an individual level with a client. Otherwise, we could be talking, this is a podcast in itself, going about all the different benefits of different supplements. And like you rightly said, if you look at Instagram now, if everybody bought what everyone said was useful, I think we'd be pretty ill off all the supplements that we were taking. So yeah, there's a handful. And then the rest are, on a case-by-case basis.
So I suppose getting you on the show, nutrition specialist, we have to debunk a few myths, or myths that are labelled myths. So these are what I found on Google. So these are the top 7 most kind of searched things in relation to nutrition. So we'll start with number 1. So number 1 is worded, carbs are bad for you and make you gain weight. True, false, and a bit of context.
False.
Okay.
I know people prefer a quicker answer nowadays. In terms of the depths on that, carbohydrates are not an essential nutrient. You can survive without them. But because of their involvement, they're a part of a lot of really helpful foods. When we're speaking about the microbiome before, a lot of plants are heavily carbohydrate based. So if you actually want optimal health, I think carbohydrates are a part of that. Now, this stigma about carbs and weight gain, every time you eat a gram of carbohydrate, your body stores around 3 grams of water with it. So that's where the association comes from, people eating carbohydrate and then stepping on the scales. But remember, the scales just show you your kind of force on gravity. It's not telling you what you're actually made up of. So those increases are usually water. Hence also the reason why, say, for instance, when a boxer makes weight, we can have them 1.5 stone heavier within 36 hours. That's not fat. That's carbohydrate and water in the muscle. So that's where the stigma usually comes from, but we shouldn't be afraid of carbohydrate. Yeah.
No, I had a little insight there. I didn't know it stored with the water, so that was every day's a school day. So number 2 is you need to eat every 2 to 3 hours to boost your metabolism.
So this is still a biggie today. People thinking you have to eat little and often to keep the metabolism going, especially if you've got a fat loss goal that you need to eat regularly. If we're looking at just this question as a yes or no and not the upsides or downsides of doing it, you don't need to eat regularly. Your metabolism will be your metabolism. We have something called RMR, resting metabolic rate. That's your calorie requirements just to live and breathe. Or even an analogy, leaving the car on in neutral. There are costs associated with that the body has to endure to keep you alive. That won't change irrespective of your eating pattern. So eating more regularly, can it speed up your metabolism? If it does, it's very minimal. And can eating once a day slow your metabolism down? No.
This isn't one of the questions, but just while we're kind of on that, what's your kind of verdict on intermittent fasting? Is that something you're big on, something you kind of like, or are you on the fence, similar with or not in one camp, I should say, with regards to like the supplement question earlier?
People's purpose is important behind this. Now, if people are using this method as a way of losing weight and it works for them, their personality, how their routine works, then I'm all for it. And it is a method I actually use in my coaching. But if people's purpose is like, oh, I've read about autophagy and the benefits that it gives in, reducing all these diseases and the risk of them and improving your health, I will actually give my opinion on this quite clearly. The evidence doesn't show that. Autophagy can be increased from exercise, from restricting calories even, but not even going to the extremes of intermittent fasting. They will all improve autophagy. So I don't think that there's anything unique and special about fasting in that respect. And I may be wrong on this. This is what science is all about, but as the future will show us in more and more research. But I feel in what I can currently see, I don't feel that the autophagy benefits in terms of that side are anything exclusive, shall we say, over exercise, living generally well, your diet being in the right place, because it will also happen between breaks in eating that you naturally get as well. And also potential downside, which I think is a real, Bath University are doing quite a bit of research on intermittent fasting. And then they're putting them on DEXA scanners, which is the most accurate body composition method. And there is quite a bit of muscle loss. Coming back to when we were talking about before about protein turnover and regularly eating protein and the importance of that to either maintain tissue build or lose, there is some evidence to suggest that these people can be losing muscle as well that are doing intermittent fasting. And again, I like to discuss both upsides and downsides to help people make an informed decision.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried fasting. obviously I've not done it alongside testing or anything like that, so maybe my data's not entirely, well, my data won't be entirely accurate, but I just found it didn't work for me. I feel as though I need to fuel my workout, maybe because a lot of my workouts is high intensity, longevity stuff, and I just felt like it just didn't work for me from my experience. But I have heard stories where people have said, you know, it does work, has worked for them. They have lost weight or they have, you know, improved in certain aspects. So.
Yeah, and of course, and my role in that is who am I to judge what people are doing and enjoying and feeling that is having an impact on their life? But what I can do is help them go back, well, what impact is this having on my body? Is all this sacrifice worth it for this alleged benefit? And that's where I feel like I can help them make an informed decision. But from a perspective of, we've had some great success with weight loss with using intermittent fasting. It just fits in people's day better. Also, when you like say, right, well, between this window you can eat and between this window you're not going to eat. It's a very simple yes or no. So it can take a lot of the noise out in confusion, with a lot of the confusion we get in nutrition and misleading information. It keeps it simple for people, and that can be conducive to a good result.
No, most definitely. Yeah. We're back on protein with this next question. So, high protein diets damage your kidneys. I'll be honest with you, I've never come across that one before. But,
okay, yeah, that is a pretty common
one. Is it a big one? Is it?
Yeah. So this came in the 70s from research, and as I always say, it's the quality of the question that determines how good the research is. Of course, the methods matter, but the question's massive. Now, if you're looking at people with pre-existing kidney conditions, which is where this myth has come from, then we're already looking at people who have a kidney disease. The kidney is not working properly. So high loads of protein are going to increase the stress on that kidney and the urea buildup because the kidney isn't functioning well enough to get rid of it. That's very similar analogy to if you saw that I was doing a lot of steps on my watch and I broke my leg. I'm not telling you how I broke my leg, but you just correlating the two. You could think that the steps have put the stress on my body to break it. Correlation doesn't isn't causation. I could have brought that because I had an accident. So the two don't quite marry up well, but that's where the myths come from, is people with kidney disease. When we look at healthy people that don't have a kidney disease, protein is in improving quality of life, longevity of life, reducing morbidity and mortality. Protein's helpful. And whilst it may cause more work for the kidney, it's improving its function. It's not having any negative effects. But yeah, the myths come more from the research in people with pre-existing kidney disease. We're not even sure on that yet as to how beneficial reducing protein is in that population. That's more out of my area, but certainly from the perspective of the general population, you don't really need to be worrying about protein affecting your kidneys. What I would be concerned about is if you're having so much protein that it's affecting your ability to get enough of other nutrients in.
Yeah. So again, it sort of ties into the balance aspect you said earlier. This next one I have heard, so it's quite a short one. Eating fat makes you fat.
Yes, and it's the word, isn't it? Where people just associate that word with gaining weight, and myth. It essentially comes down to whether we maintain, lose, or gain weight, body fat, is predicted on our energy balance over weeks and months. If we eat a high fat meal, that you will burn more fat. If you eat a higher carb meal, you will burn more carbohydrate. Over a 24-hour period, it averages out and then comes down to energy balance of it isn't this simple in real life, but the fat loss side of it is of calories in, calories out. What you're actually burning will just differ throughout the 24-hour period depending on the state that your body is in, what you've eaten, exercise, things like that, but it always averages out.
So staying on fats here, so you can reduce fat by targeting a specific area in your workouts. That's what I do here a lot as well.
Wish you could. And if you know how, please tell me, because I'll create that program. But you can't spot reduce where we take fat from, unfortunately. This is where, the demand for liposuctions come in, because, that can remove those fat cells, but then they usually go somewhere else then. But the only emerging research is when people have got high levels of visceral fat that's around their organs, which is a real risky type of fat to have, because it increases the risk of cancers, type 2 diabetes, heart attack, stroke risk. We do find that cardiovascular exercise can have a positive effect on reducing that specifically. But other than that, in terms of spot reducing, say for instance, if I gain weight, it goes on my backside. How do I get rid of that? You can't really spot reduce it.
No, I'm exactly the same. Man's the old love handles. So yeah, I've tried every single workout there is that's led you to believe, oh yeah, you can reduce that.
It will often come off quite well of where you've got a lot of it. When we're putting 3 people through DEXA scans, and you can see that there's a colour mapping element of the scan where you're green, where you've got more healthier levels of body fat, yellow where moderate, and red where it's really high. It will come off there quite a lot. But then you also get the unwanted side where people will be losing weight and they know they've still got more to go, but then the face will go too slim. And that's mainly down to just genetics and how you're programmed.
So the next one is detox diets and juices are essential for cleansing the body.
Yeah, I've always had a staple answer for this. They're not essential, because if they were, then we wouldn't be able to manage without them. And also, the liver has been cleansing our blood all our life, and if it didn't, we'd be dead. It's as simple as that. That is the liver's job, and you're not going to get anywhere near the benefits of these detox. This is just marketing. You're not going to get anywhere near the benefits of what you would as what the liver is doing for you every day while you're not even thinking.
Yeah, that's something with regards to the detox diets and juices and what have you. I've never really kind of been sold on it for that reason. Not that I'm educated enough as yourself, Sam, but certainly I kind of knew it was a fad. This isn't a question, but I'm just going to transition into fad diets because I thought that might have been mentioned as one. What's kind of like your take on the fad diets? Obviously, quite a big one at the forefront now is the carnivore diet, and then there was the name escapes me. What's the big one that everyone does? The Atkins diet sort of thing. What's your take on those?
Every diet tells you it's the next best thing. It always starts with a story at the beginning of the book of how they come to find that, and that it's the best in the world and it's going to change people's lives. And it's usually an element of restriction that causes it. And I just don't think we need to be isolating food groups out of our diet because of the benefits that they can have. And our understanding from what we know in decades of science now is that the sweet spot is somewhere in between. But also, people are always going to be attracted to extremes. And that's why the adverts do it that way, to catch our attention. But the sweet spot is somewhere in between an inclusion and inclusivity, not restriction, to get to optimal health. I just think sometimes they take it far way too extreme, and sometimes at the consequence of affecting our relationship with food and our mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I tried the carnivore diet a couple of years back, only for a month, and don't get me wrong, I did lose weight, and obviously I naturally got a bit leaner from day 1 to day 30. But going back, I suspect with the gut health aspect, let's just put it this way: toilet time was really unpleasant for the most part, and yeah, all right, there was like these visual aesthetic benefits, but I wouldn't want to have to go for it. I know. I suspect your body eventually would condition itself to it, but yeah, it wasn't wasn't enjoyable, should we say? And I found that whatever I was doing in my day to day, I had to make sure I was in close proximity to a toilet at some point.
And a lot of that'll because, like we said, when you take a food group, i.e. carbohydrate, I'll reduce it drastically, and then we're losing a lot of that fibre, which is absolutely crucial for gut health, microbiome, but it's also impacting your digestive ability. Hence why there wasn't enough fibre in your diet to promote normal bowel movements, and that's not only obviously noticing physical symptoms, but if we look under the hood, that will be impacting your health. And I'd love to have seen your blood work as well. How it would have impacted on that in terms of your cholesterol level, your LDLs, your triglycerides, and how that can impact your long-term cardiovascular disease risk.
I mean, they don't just cast it because it was a few years ago when I tried it out. The only kind of thing I had is I was constantly hungry, so I couldn't wait to be eating. But my energy levels were very on top. Like I found that I was never getting fit. Like later on in the day, I suppose we're all guilty of having that afternoon slump sort of thing. Yeah. I wasn't getting that. So that there was that element of it, but I didn't see enough pros in it to sustain it and continue doing it. And I personally wouldn't recommend it, even though I love my meat. I'm a massive meat eater. It just didn't work for me, that diet, on a personal level. But obviously, speaking to yourself and the science behind it, you now know why, kind of thing. Last question on the debunking myths. So this is a common one. I'm sure everyone listening will have heard this. So late night eating causes weight gain, or alternatively, if you're eating after 8 p.m, that generally causes weight gain. Yeah, Oprah Winfrey started that, didn't she? Oh, I've lost all this weight because I don't eat after 8 o'clock.
That 8 p.m. window.
Yeah.
I totally understand people's kind of confusion and frustration with this. It's very common. There's people that I've had on the phone and in consultations where they're kicking themselves because they came in from a long stressful work day. Some things happened unpredicted that meant that they missed that eating window, and they're, I've ruined it. I've had it at 9 p.m. And it's like, hang on a minute. Like, where's this thought come from? That because you ate an hour later than planned that you've now ruined it. The body doesn't have this switch where it knows what time it is and that you've just gone past this point, and then everything that you eat is going to be stored as fat or is going to have detrimental impacts on your health. Late night eating, if it means you've not had anything to eat all day, and it's going to mean you're going to get some meaningful nutrients in, it's not going to have any impact on a fat loss goal. No serious impact or measurable impact on general health. The only thing that it could do in some people is, going to bed on quite a full stomach can sometimes cause acid reflux and a bit of discomfort. But obviously you'll adjust that if that is you. But yeah, there's no magical window where we just go over this point in time and your physiology changes.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of knew the answer for that one anyway, but certainly, obviously, it was one of the most searched myths. But yeah, it is crazy how these myths come to be, really. It's quite interesting. So hopefully we've helped a few listeners out there, if some of them thought any of these were accurate. As part of this as well, I also thought I'll put the questions to the listeners as well. So I'm sure you've used it yourself, where you can ask me anything on Instagram. So I used that a couple of weeks back. Got inundated. So apologies if I don't answer your question, but I've kind of whittled it down to 10. Thought it was a nice cushy number. It's kind of diversified. Some of the stuff we've touched on, some of it we can maybe expand on, some of it's brand new information. So the first one's centered around creatine. So the question was, is creatine safe to use long term, and how does it impact performance? I know you kind of answered that earlier on, but if there's...
It's the most researched supplement there is. Its safety has been covered now. But still people will try and reinvent the wheel and bring something out on Instagram. But yeah, the research is solid on creatine. It's not just got performance benefits for restoring energy systems and being able to continue repetitions of an exercise, but there's also potential brain benefits as well. So it's an absolute tick in the box for me.
So the next question is, we've labelled it for motivation. So how can I stay consistent and motivated with my nutrition and fitness goals throughout the year?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I always like to phrase this when I sit down with clients is their expectations on what motivation is, because they're not going to be motivated all year round. And, potentially expecting that to be the case, you're onto a loser straight away, because just the way that the brain works, that you're not going to be motivated all of the time. So what I always do is have a minimal operating protocol for clients, so that even, when they're not having a great day, what's the minimum operating procedure that we can still do to still be ticking that box long term? And then the other element of that is setting a goal that actually means something. I have a really good friend of mine who's also a nutrition coach, Jason Monroe. He invented this, but it's such a great idea of having push and pull goals. So you have push goals that actually get you going. So if you think, right, I hate this tire on my belly, I'm feeling bloated all the time, I hate feeling this stressed and just poor health, they're goals that will get you up off your backside and moving, push goals. But then you get to a point where you're midway through and you've got this hurdle that you need to overcome. Because if you don't overcome it, you're just going to go back straight to square one, because there becomes a point that goal isn't meaningful anymore. it loses its pain. So similar to, it's similar to when you no longer have that tire that you can see when you've got your shirt on. It stops hurting. And then you need something to pull you over that hurdle to keep you going for this to be a long-term goal. Otherwise, you're risking going straight back to square one. So if, for instance, I want to set the example to my children. I don't want to have a condition that my dad ended up having because of his health and how he managed his health. I don't want to end up, down and depressed as a result of how I'm managing my life. They're things that will pull you over that wall in between that risky point and keep you going to make it a lifelong goal. Whereas though, if you're kind of just throwing yourself in the deep end and you're just solely relying on motivation and you've just got push goals, you're going to struggle when it gets tough, because there will be days you don't feel like it.
Yeah. It's that, when we see it in sport an awful lot, don't we? It's kind of like when you've conquered your Everest, what's next kind of thing, because it's so hard to stay motivated. You've done everything, particularly, like I say, with sport, where careers end, because whether they're just retired or whether injuries have happened, what's next? How can I stay? I was motivated my entire life to do this one thing that I was very good at, and I achieved it. But now you're kind of looking for something else. I'm very big on goal setting, and it gives me a level of kind of like discipline. And it also ties into the motivation, because we are only human. You're not going to be motivated every single day you wake up. Things happen, life gets in the way, whether that's people's involvement, just, for instance, becoming ill, for instance. You're going to remain kind of demotivated in some aspects. So I find that goal setting, and I don't just mean with regards to nutrition, I just mean having a goal, having a purpose to strive for. Yeah, okay, you might have been not so good on that day, but tomorrow's a new day. You can have another crack at the whip. So
I always say on that, you just reminded me, is if you were a business owner and you were trying to take on a staff member, would you rather take on the staff member that is perfect 20% of the time or consistent 80% of the time? It's the consistent one all day.
100%, yeah.
So we should just look at our goals just in terms of motivation, how we feel, to strive for consistency and not perfection, because there are going to be days that it doesn't go perfect. And even sometimes you are going to get counterintuitive outcomes for trying to be perfect. So always aim for consistency, because it does always trump perfection.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that, Sam. Back onto the questions. So this one, we've labelled it nutrition. I suppose they're all nutrition in some aspects. So the question is, what's more important for weight loss, calorie deficit or macronutrient balance?
So first of all, whether you lose weight or not, it is down to the calories. However, the macronutrients have a big impact on how that goes in terms of appetite, hunger. Sometimes it's down to initially where we might store our weight because of our hormone profile. And it has a massive impact on what type of tissue we will lose. It's all well and good telling someone that you've lost 10 pounds in 3 weeks, but if half of that is muscle, that's not great. So making sure that we're having enough protein, and supporting our body's nutrient requirements and putting health at the forefront rather than just weight loss. We don't want to get weight loss if it's a goal at the expense of somebody's health. So, it's important to have the health element there. But if the question is about weight loss, it's the first thing needs to be the energy balance equation first.
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. We're back onto protein now with this one. So we've kind of answered this to a degree, but I'll see if there's any more meat to the bone. How much protein should I consume daily for muscle building or fat loss?
Again, case-by-case basis, but typically, to give you an idea, I would normally have, for weight loss elements, I would have, women around kind of that 1.6, 1.8 grams per kilo, and men for that matter. When there's kind of a bodybuilding element or muscle gain element to it, we're in that region of 2 to 2.5 grams per kilo. So if you were 70 kilos, it'd be minimum 140 grams of protein a day, and that makes sure that we've got enough protein there, not only for managing appetite, but also we have enough protein there for the building processes required. And also, if there's a muscle building element, you would make sure the calories are in a slight surplus as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. So this next question is about VO2 max. But before I ask you, do you want to, I mean, I know what it is, but just to put a bit of context for the listeners, what it is, sort of like in layman's terms.
Yeah. So a lot of people will know this probably from their watches,
Yeah.
because it gives a score. But what VO2 max actually is, it's the maximum point at which the body can utilize oxygen, that you're still actually using oxygen. And then past that point, you go anaerobic, you're not using oxygen. So it has become the golden measure of fitness, which I don't really like, because you can have actually two people with a differing VO2 maxes, and the lower VO2 max in certain races could be better. So, there's context to it. It isn't only one single golden marker. But VO2 max testing and all the other data that you get with it is brilliant in terms of the impact that it can have. But I would always tell people, if you do get it done, be aware for your VO2 max. Obviously, generally speaking, the higher the better. But it's not the only measure that's important, because if you've got a really good VO2 max, but your threshold of your lactate threshold isn't where it should be, or your economy isn't where it should be, you're not going to be doing as great as you might think. Yeah. So see it as a piece of the puzzle and not the whole puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much answered the question. So it would be, how can improving my VO2 max enhance my overall fitness and performance? But as you've just touched on, it's kind of like the higher the better. But obviously, that's not the be-all, end-all.
The test that you do, let's say it was a runner, for example, the test that you do, that we often do, is we start them at a really, really low pace, and then it goes up every minute, faster and faster and faster, until they are completely exhausted and they can't stay on that treadmill anymore. Now, what that does is, because you're attached to a mask, the mask is attached to a machine that's analysing the gases in your body. We're measuring you all the way through your metabolism. All the way from resting metabolism, near enough that you're just walking, all the way up to kind of gone past the point of using oxygen, which is VO2 max, and then to the point that you're anaerobic, you're full of lactate, and you can't continue. Your body has to cease the exercise. We get a lot of information from that, not just your VO2 max. So I would always ask people, when they've had this test, always look for what it is and get an idea, but also look at what else is in there that you could be potentially missing if you've solely just got this isolated view for looking at VO2 max. Yeah. You're going to find out about what your fat and carb burning is like during exercise, which if you're a long endurance distance athlete is crucial. You're going to find out about your economy. What are the running costs for you to run? Is it efficient? What's your miles per gallon? You get heart rate training zones, which you can then give to your coach who's planning your training. And then because you're training in specific zones, they have different physiological outcomes. So, and a lot of people, what they do is they think, I have this conversation all the time, it's no pain, no gain. I'm going out the door every session, balls to the wall, nothing else. That's not a smart way to train. And with training zones, you can get the best adaptation, so you're training optimally. So if you are going to do it at the beginning of your training camp, not at the end.
Again, that just going back to the kind of balls to the wall, I mean, that's kind of like your, I suppose your characters like your David Goggins and people like that. And again, that's then filtered down to what we was touching on at the start with the fitness industry. A lot of people who are getting these PCs will preach that. That's the best way of training without actually even acknowledging the science. But interesting with David Goggins, I don't know if you've read his book, one of the things he touched on is later on he was getting all these difficulties. And he's now a big advocate on sort of like stretching, mobility, that kind of thing. But not a lot of that gets preached out. They kind of just take that one context of stay hard and go out there on your shield sort of thing every single workout.
I like some of the messages, but I also think stay hard or all them kind of discipline messages also does come back to a point that a strong, successful character is disciplined in the sense that keep your hard days hard and your easy days easy and stick to it.
Yeah.
Because the science is clear on that is going to have you at your optimal. But, when it's time to back it off a bit, that is a skill. Because it's very hard. Sometimes I even find it myself, you feel like you just want to smash it up, go for a threshold run and go hard. But that really, if we're training optimal and getting the best benefits for this high rocks race or whatever you've got, stick to the principles that the science has shown time and time again, that it can get you better.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting outlook to have that, like from a different perspective. But yeah, I'm very big on kind of like, you know, I mean, I usually welcome me easier training days now, because 9 times out of 10 I'm ready for them.
Yeah, I like that, because when it does come to going hard, you know, there's a time and place for it, and then, you know, that's the time to double down and graft, and also because you've then took some, you know, easier days, which there's specific benefits for doing that you don't get from going hard, or at least you've not then got the fatigue, and you can then actually go at a high intensity to get the benefit from doing it. If you've been smashing yourself all week, what's your output actually going to be like? You're just going to get a subpar outcome.
Exactly, and I'm sure you've heard this phrase working with a lot of boxers about leaving it all in the gym. That's like a big no-no sort of thing, and that's an old school ideology of what we just said, you know, play to your strengths, work around the science, absorb the data, and don't go hard every single time.
Them principles are apparent in all sports.
Yeah. So we're kind of back onto supplements. I suppose we've kind of answered this one, but I'll ask it and see if there's anything else you want to add. So are supplements like BCAAs or multivitamins worth it, or can I get everything from food? I'm guessing it means natural food there.
Yeah, but answer to both of them is you can get it from food. There's context, like I said before. If you're losing weight, multivitamin might be a good insurance policy. Branched chain amino acids, that's what BCAAs stand for. They are actually the building blocks of protein. There's 3 amino acids: isoleucine, leucine, and valine. They are amino acids that are in protein. So when you're having a complete protein, you know, whey protein, for example, or chicken breast, you're already having them amino acids. If you imagine protein is the house, amino acids are the building blocks. So branched chain amino acids are often kind of marketed as this extra thing. A lot of people are already having them in the diet. So again, you can get it from food.
From natural sources. Next one's we've labelled performance. So what are the best pre-workout meals or snacks to boost performance during training?
This is dependent on, of course, what people are training for. But yeah, carbs are king in terms of if you want to have a really good workout, getting your carbohydrates in. You know, for most people, it's usually around a 50-gram serving. You know, which you might get in, say, a slice of saurine and some low-fat chocolate milk. And, you know, that just tops up those glycogen stores so that it gives you that energy for that workout. And the impacts can be huge. What you just got to watch out for is the timing of it. We have a window really that if you're eating 2 hours before, that's pretty good, so that we're not having issues with blood sugar regulation. An hour is risky. An hour out before can get quite risky. Some people can get something called reactive hypoglycemia. So when they start the exercise, because they had something to eat like an hour before, quite a lot of insulin floating around in the body. And then when exercise starts, the blood sugar just plummets and they start to feel that dizziness and lethargy, and just they're not going to have a good session. So just either make sure that you're having the food like that I just said about 2 hours before, or if you're really stuck for time and you've just ended up rocking up at the gym 5 minutes before, you could use something like an energy gel. So it's a fast absorbing right before, then you won't run into them problems where you've got that risky 1 hour window that can cause issues with your blood sugar. Yeah.
Thinking back when you were describing that then about times where I've obviously felt a bit dizzy, whether that's been on a run or a workout, and thinking back, it probably is because I've eaten not too far prior to the workout. So yeah, science speaks volumes again, mate. Next one is sports and electrolytes. So again, we've not really touched on electrolytes much, but obviously that's a big thing now, isn't it? You see that and hear that everywhere in the fitness industry. So, excuse me, the question is, are sports drinks and electrolytes really necessary, or can I just stick to water for hydration during workouts?
Yeah, so I view them as two separate things. Your sports drinks usually contain carbohydrate. If your exercise is less than an hour and a half, carbohydrate digestion isn't really needed during exercise, because you'll have plenty enough in there in your muscle to sustain that. There is potential benefit for a mouth rinse. If you just literally swill the carbohydrate in your mouth and spit it out, the brain thinks carbs is on the way to the muscle, so it keeps the power output going. So you may get a benefit there. With electrolytes, I'm probably not going to be the most popular person for saying this, but there's a lot more marketing than there is scientific backing. If anybody does want to read around this area, Dr. Alan McCubbin from Australia has done some amazing research on electrolytes. And electrolytes are very different to, say, carbohydrates, where a lot of people are conscious that they've got this finite store of energy that needs to be topped up. Electrolytes are not in the same boat as that, because we've got sodium stores everywhere all over the body, and actually an ability to reabsorb sodium from the skin when we're sweating to maintain our electrolyte level or our sodium water balance. So if people are exercising and it's less than 4 hours, the scientific research is showing you don't need electrolytes. There's a lot of marketing to say otherwise, but you'll never see Science2Health have a sponsorship affiliation, just for the reason that we need to stay impartial and give people advice to make informed decisions. I'm not coming at this from a money-making angle. I'm literally giving you the science. If the exercise is over 4 hours, and we're talking things like Ironmans and things like that, and maybe some marathon runners, there may be a case because you can lose up to 70% of your body water that needs to be replaced through fluids, and it's important to get that balance right. If it's less than 4 hours, I'm really not seeing the benefit of taking electrolytes on board.
It's interesting because I'm one of those guilty as charged here. I do put electrolytes in my drink, and I tend to take it anywhere with me. And I've got to the point now where I'm probably having more electrolyte added to the thing, not sports drinks, than I am water. And like you've just mentioned there, sort of like me cogs are going in my brain a bit here. I'm not actually seeing that much of a difference in terms of benefits, because they'll have you believe, it'll keep your energy sustained longer, it'll help you with this, and thinking on it, it's not really doing anything for me in that sense.
They can be used, for example, there's contexts where I'll use them to help rehydration, so they'll be straight after a boxer's made weight or an MMA fighter's made weight, there'll be electrolytes in that recovery drink because it encourages a water uptake. Let's say, for instance, when somebody's had a salty pizza, you drink something and you feel like the drink can fall in because that's a receptor being switched on to help you take more fluid on. So for rehydration, it's fantastic. But if we're talking about, is there a need for taking them during exercise and during all the day? If you think about the Western diet, it's already got too much salt in it. Yeah. And our diets have already got, we're not going to be deficient in salt. So there's contexts where electrolytes might be useful, but not at the level as it's currently, in my opinion, and what the scientific research is showing, not at the level that warrants this level of marketing. And also, I think a lot of people now, especially when you're looking in the triathlon world, the high rocks world, everybody's got electrolytes with them. Yeah, no, you see it everywhere. It seems it's been something that's always been there. Obviously, I've done a few marathons, and people used to always preach like, "Oh, you want these electrolyte tablets, blah blah blah." But as time's gone on, I've noticed now it's become a bit like the protein analogy in the supermarket. It's everywhere. It's on everything. Yeah, and people often say to me, "What about cramping then? Why is it that I'm getting to a certain point and I'm cramping?" Now, it's very hard to research cramping because you can't just get a group of people in research and go, right, 3, 2, 1, cramp. It's not that. You can try and induce it, but from our understandings, it's actually fatigue that is one of the biggest factors of a cause for cramping, not necessarily electrolyte balance. And also, why does cramping happen when people are in bed and they're not exercising? Is that down to sodium? There's plenty of different causes for cramping, and I just feel like there is a place for electrolytes in certain contexts, but not everywhere like it's currently being marketed. Yeah. No, really interesting that, mate. The last question from the listener is all about BMI, something I tend to disregard, but I'll get your take on it. So how accurate is BMI as a measure of health, and should I rely on it for my fitness goals? Right, great question. So BMI as a tool, I think it gets absolutely slated publicly. Because for two reasons, and there is some definitely justifications to this. The tool's being wrongly used, i.e. it is a measure of height over weight. It isn't actually looking at what your weight is made up of. So if we looked at half or maybe more of the Wigan Warriors team, all their BMI is going to be way over because they've got a lot of muscle, but they're not necessarily in a high risk health group where they're at risk of disease from their body composition. It's a fantastic research tool looking at what we call epidemiological research, looking at population level. But when you're working with people on a one-to-one basis, we have better testing. Measure the body fat, put them on a DEXA scanner, even use bioelectrical impedance like an in-body scanner or body tracks to get an idea of what their body fat and muscle amount is. That's way better. Too often I've heard horror stories where I'm sat with people and they've been to see the GP and they're like, right, your BMI's over. You should be at this weight. They've not been at that weight since they were 15 because it's not accounting for the muscle and body fat and the body composition. So yeah, not a great tool to use one-to-one with people. Never use it, in fact. But as a research tool, when you account for athletic populations and you take that out, it's a fantastic research tool for predicting disease and mortality.
Yeah. So like a lot of things I've noticed throughout this interview, there's kind of like pros and cons with everything really. Yeah. And obviously I suppose it all boils down to researching yourself or speaking to someone who's got the experience in that field. Cheers for answering all them. We're coming to the kind of the close of this interview now, and you've hopefully I'd like to think the listeners, I certainly have. I've got a few takeaways from it. Similar to the start, we always ask this question to our guests at the end, and that is, what are you now grateful for in life, Sam?
Health, happiness, and also freedom. I originally went self-employed and set Science2Health up to do what I'm passionate about. But with that, I've also been able to say no more to things. I know that a lot of kind of business professionals and things like that are telling you to say yes more, but all too often I work with business professionals and you see that at the expense of chasing certain things in the career, there's a consequence elsewhere. Family suffer, relationships suffer. And I feel like I've been able to, and my clients help as well, I've been able to create a life for me and my family of one where happiness and health is at the forefront of it. And I feel that puts me in a good position to help others as well.
No, fantastic, mate. And it's quite good to hear that, because again, similar to what I said at the start with the challenge question, this is kind of like more of an educational interview, if you will. So it's interesting to put that question in. Because normally we'd have someone who's told their entire life journey, and you've told snippets of it, but it just goes to show it's kind of humanised the context in a sense. It's not just the nutrition, this, that, and the other. It's there is that element to it. So it's been great. I appreciate your time, Sam. Before we go, obviously we'll link everything in the description anyway. But how can people get in touch with you? What have you got? Any kind of like deals coming up? This is going to go out in January, so just in terms of time frame.
Yeah, so we've got a fat loss program starting end of Jan, early Feb. That'll be for busy mums and dads, business professionals, people that just want to put themselves first, but it'll be educated in a different way. No fad diets. We're aiming for a result that you can keep. So a lot of education to come with it, a lot of learning, and also, as always, there's the testing, health checks, nutrition coaching. And if people want to get in touch, the best place is either science2health.com, Science2Health, so that's number 2, or Science2Health UK on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll put all the links to those in the description. Yep. So, just have a look and you can get in touch with Sam. And that testing, is that all year round, is it, for your clients?
All year round and mobile.
Okay.
I'm probably one of the few that does it, where, all around the Northwest, at least, I'm usually able to get to people from 5 a.m. for testing.
Okay.
And ideally for, if we're looking at blood markers and things like that, it's best that they're tested within a few hours of waking anyway, for a proper, accurate assessment.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Sam. As they say, every day's a school day. I've learnt a great deal here today. Have you had a good time, mate?
Loved it. And I really appreciate yourself and Zach having me on.
No problem, mate. Cheers for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. I've been Daniel Hodges. This has been Sam McKenzie, and you've been listening to the Hodge-Cast. Take it easy.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we believe you can definitely take something away from today's guest. We couldn't attract guests such as this without a solid fan base. The best way we can grow this is through subscriptions. So, if you haven't already done so, can I please ask you hit that subscribe button and help us continue to put out content for you all to enjoy. Until next time.